going to get started, okay? As we get started though, I want to take just a few minutes and I want to explain to you what a lesson study is about, okay? When you do a lesson study, it is where you can take each portion of the lesson you're teaching and get better at pieces of it, okay? So in this lesson study, my goal is that the times we're doing it this year, you two will be working with me, okay? One of you, today, you and I are gonna execute the lesson today, okay? Then when I come back in January, then you'll get a chance to. But the thing is because you're learning alongside us today, we're gonna go deeper in January than we are right now. Does that make sense? That's why I like to keep the same lead teachers with me, so that you're growing deeper, so you can continue to carry what you're learning back to your peers in your grade level too. Making sense there? Okay. So in a lesson study, what happens is that you and I will go into what I call a fishbowl, okay? When I tell them that we're in the fishbowl, we're the only ones in the room who can talk. All they can do is take notes, okay? When you and I come out of the fishbowl, then they can ask questions. They're gonna tell us what kinds of things they saw us doing. Because see, they're looking at it from a different set of eyes than you and I are looking at it when we do it. We're planning the lesson. They're gonna be looking at it and going, okay, I saw y'all do this, and we're gonna go, oh yeah, we did do that. Does that make sense? So that's the reason I like this type of a thing, because you're seeing it from different viewpoints, okay? We're actually going to be doing a coaching cycle through this, okay? So it's not like I'm truly coaching you this year, but all the pieces are the pieces of a coaching cycle. Because in a few moments, you and I go in the fishbowl and we're gonna plan this lesson. After we plan it, we're gonna let them and us, and we're gonna debrief on what happened in this lesson. Then we're gonna go teach it. While we're teaching it, they're gonna be watching the students to see exactly what they notice about the kids as they're reading. You know what I'm saying? What types of anecdotal notes might they take on the students that we're taking too? Am I making sense? Okay. We'll come back, we'll reflect on the lesson, what we learned about our kids, what parts of the lesson that we planned really helped them. If we were gonna do this lesson again, what might we do different? That's all it is, okay? And then we'll think about what our next steps are gonna be, which is what a coaching cycle is, okay? So anybody got any questions for me? How this looks? Nope, we all good? All right. So we're in the fishbowl now. If y'all need to say anything before we start, go ahead and just say it, because once we go in the fishbowl, it's just us.
Have you started recording?
All I gotta say is the eagle is no ordinary bird.
I love
We know that, right?
That's right. That's right. Okay, because I'm not really good at this, because of names and stuff. What's your first name? Jill. Jill, thank you. Jill. Here we go.
Jill Ray?
I found me a Jill. Really? She's been calling me Jill for weeks. In my defense, I did it one time. And then when I came back in here, I go, wait a minute, her name's not Jill. And they looked at me and they go, we wondered who you're talking about. So then I called her Jill Ruth. So now I have a Jill. Yay.
And a Jill Ruth.
And a Jill Ruth. All right.
So,
So-
this down. I'm sorry.
No.
It was making noise.
That's okay. Mine sometimes does that, and I think I have it, and I have it turned
That's
off.
exactly right.
All right. So when I got the information from the district about what you have going on today, okay, I'm gonna tell you just what I understand so far. I understand that we're gonna be doing the Moss Brothers on the Job.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a level J, and some of the things that you had said was that obstacles is that you want the kids to make connection between the text and the illustration. Okay, which are gonna be really vital for the understanding of the story.
Right, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the other is you had already looked at thinking about what goal you might want to use, which is great, using the text and illustrations to build a clear understanding. So that makes those connections, all right? And then you said your area of concern was reading with appropriate stress, specifically when they're in that dialogue, is what I'm figuring that to mean, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Mhm.
So talk to me just a couple of minutes about your kids. How many kids are in this group?
This has 4 kids.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
all right.
And the reason I picked this is I have one little girl in there who's very articulate. She really thinks out of the box. And she leads sort of the others
Mm-hmm.
and does a good job with that. The hardest thing is like when she starts talking, she goes at it. Like a lot of times she can manipulate the group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I have another little boy in there who's doing real well too. He I can see him really growing with his reading.
Uh-huh.
And comprehension we're still working on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have another little girl who's about the same. And then my last little boy, he's very choppy when he reads.
Okay.
And so we're just trying to work on that fluency. And then reads real fast too, tries to get finished.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
it's a good little group.
Yeah.
It really is.
All right. So Jill, here's the things I want to tell you up front, okay? You know what your students' needs are. You're already looking at reading behaviors. That is important as a reader. So I'm saying, as a teacher, I'm saying awesome, because you know your kids. One of the things I just want to make sure that we're clear on, not only with you, but with your grade level, okay? Is that guided reading is the specific context that we teach that makes it so easy for differentiated instruction. When you're teaching whole group, differentiating can happen, but it makes it sometimes harder, right? But when you're in this guided reading group, you have just given me 4 specific things, actually 3, because the girl's about the same as the boy, but 3 specific things that we can differentiate to make sure that we're helping those kids as they're reading today. That's important, okay? All right, so if you don't mind for just a moment, because I don't have the book,
Yes, sure.
okay? I want you to also just kind of go back through it with me and look.
Okay.
Is there anything else when you're thinking about the book? Just are there specific pictures? Is there any word in here or anything that just kind of stuck out to you that might be a little confusing, aside from what you've already said?
I was reading in the little pamphlet, the word stripes was one word.
Yeah.
And then really when they turn the page, they have that illustration to help them with that.
Right. But it doesn't help on that page, does
Right,
it?
that's exactly right.
That's right.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right.
See, I think
Okay, that's
there was-
good.
There was one more, I had made a note. Here, let's see. Stripes, and it was something else in there, there was another vocabulary point too.
You think they're gonna know the pipe in the picture? You know, when you're like looking at that pipe, because I don't know your kids, I'm just asking.
They probably will.
Okay.
I think they would have
Okay. Have some
enough
seen
background
there.
knowledge
Okay.
on that. Yes,
Good.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. And then so many times too, the text really doesn't tell you what's happening in the story.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the illustrations sort of lead the story.
Right, right.
So I thought they would really enjoy that too.
Yeah. Okay,
But stripes, I think, was really about the only.
all right.
Oh, umbrella. That was it. Umbrella.
Okay.
Which I know they know what an umbrella is, but I was unsure. Yes. But they had it right here. And this is actually, the text goes along.
Yeah.
The illustration goes along with the text on the same
Okay.
page.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
And I think they would be okay with that.
Okay.
Stripes was just really the one thing
Yeah.
that sort of,
You're unsure whether or not they would, okay.
I hear it saying strips.
Right. Okay. So, one of the things that I feel like is important, okay, for us as we're doing a lesson like this, and some people think I'm going, well, it doesn't follow this exactly. Well, it will, is that I like to read my book before I ever go into the lesson folder, okay? Because I know my students.
Mm-hmm.
And because I know my students, then I'm looking for specific things that might be a concern for those kids. Does that make sense?
Right, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then after I do that, then I turn into looking at my folder. So let's look at the introduction part for a moment, okay? And a rule of thumb for me is that when I do the introduction, normally I do the first bullet and the last bullet for sure.
Okay.
Take a look at those two bullets and tell me why you think I do those.
Well, on the first, you're looking at the cover of the book.
Uh-huh,
And so you're sort of getting your impression, what
Right.
you think the text.
right,
And then the last one, you're going back to the beginning of the book to find out what happened.
right. So you're telling them what the book is
Right. And then you're
and your
reviewing it.
purposes,
Mhm.
purpose for reading it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Something I learned, and I wish I had learned this earlier in my life, okay, is that F&P does something on the back of their books that we have on the back of our books a lot of times when we go to pick up books to read. And that is, notice on the back it says, the Moss brothers are on the job and anything can happen. So a lot of times, I'll go to look and see what they have here on the back, as well as what's up here on this first bullet, and determine what it is I want to say as I introduce.
Okay.
Sometimes what they have on the back is perfect and I don't have to say anything else.
Gotcha.
Sometimes I have to add a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
because it may not be quite enough.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
But it makes it easier. That way when you get up, and of course you know me, I see your sticky notes too, but you know me, if I have to add something different on my book, I just have it right there so when I hold it up.
You see it.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Okay. So, the next piece then is thinking about the rest of these bullets. There are things that you mentioned. You mentioned the fact of the stripes, page 5, and how the illustrations lead the story. Okay? All right. So thinking about those things with our kids, let's look at these bullets here for just a moment. All right? And tell me, and I know you've got some ideas already, which is wonderful, but see if there's anything else that comes to your mind as you're looking at it.
Okay. I went with number 2 especially
Uh-huh.
because it said, have you ever made a mess by not paying attention?
Yeah.
And I thought my little Blake,
Yeah.
I could really see her
Uh-huh.
bringing back, sharing some information, and she
Right.
would enjoy that.
Right.
Um,
And that goes back to what you said earlier about making connections.
right.
You want the kids to make connections, okay?
And that's something that everybody's made a mess.
Right.
At some it's easy to it's relatable.
Okay. All right, keep going. What else?
And then this one on page 5 it talks about the stripes again.
Okay.
Well, it introduces that, so I thought that would be a good thing to
Yeah.
do.
How does that introduce it? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
7.
7.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Page 5.
Get ready to paint the floor.
Okay. So we could use that bullet on page 5 to kind of start to introduce and not go any further with the stripes then, couldn't we?
Okay, right.
Wouldn't that help it? Okay. We could use that bullet to do that.
Okay, so we definitely want to do 1
Uh-huh.
and definitely want to do 2.
2. Uh-huh. All
And
right.
then definitely the last.
Right.
Okay.
Now going back again to what you said, okay? Illustrations lead the story. I'm wondering if to set the purpose to help them is because we know that is to pick just a page, not one of the pages that's gonna tell too much. Does that make
Right.
sense? But pick a page that has a good illustration and let them talk about that particular just illustration for a moment.
Okay.
You know, like, even this one comes to my mind. I don't know about you, but
That's
even
the
this
one.
Is that, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it's on the front.
Yeah.
On the
Just
title
looking
page.
at this page, that's
Mhm.
right. Take them to that title page and say,
Okay.
let's just, because a lot of times when we're reading books that have illustrations, they tell us so much more than the words do. We could just tell them that.
Right. Okay.
So it's gonna be important that you not only read what the words are saying, but take a moment and look at the illustration to see what else the illustration is telling you
So would
about
you
the
do that
story.
first,
I would do
do
that
that-
before
do
we
this
ever
first?
read.
Okay.
Yeah.
and then go
And-
into the bullets?
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I think I would do that like after we've done this part right here,
Okay.
introducing the book, as we talk about it, and then I would say, so have any of you ever made a mess?
Okay.
Because you're helping them make the connection.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Right, and it goes in with number 2.
That's
also.
right.
Okay.
That's right. And I think that in itself would help them meet some of the confusion that you're
Right.
thinking they may have, okay? So, I'm gonna tell you something right now that a lot of people still struggle with sometimes with me when I tell them this. I don't think you're going to, just from the conversation we've just had, okay?
Okay.
But a lot of teachers still struggle with this, and that is, when they go to teach this lesson, they think the lesson is about the book, okay?
Mhm.
It's not about the book.
Okay.
The lesson is about the reading strategies that we get children using to make them stronger readers. You see what I'm saying? Because what can happen, I've seen it in the past, in fact, not only seen it, I've done it, okay? And that is, I can wring this book completely out of so much that I could teach them from just this one book, that I could spend an entire week teaching this one book if I'm not careful. Because there's so much in it I could teach.
Right.
But the problem is that if I'm teaching everything at one time out of this book, then the kids are getting so much at one time, they're not really able to take what they're learning, put it into application so they own it, so then they can take something else. Does that make sense?
To get overwhelmed.
That's right.
Yes.
Just like we do.
Right.
Right,
Most
okay.
definitely.
So that's the reason why I wanna make that clear as we're working. I think that's a good point as y'all work in your PLCs with your teachers too, to help them begin to see that, okay? The other piece that leads to is that when you're doing an introduction, you already were showing me how you were only gonna pull just a couple of bullets.
Mhm.
That is awesome. There are still gonna be some teachers in our school, possibly, okay, that still feel led to do the bullets because they're more of a black and white person in the way they see things.
That was me the first time. I
Okay.
felt like I had to do it all.
Right.
I was doing justice to it.
Right, that's
Yeah.
right.
Cover all
And so
bases.
because of it,
Mhm.
but what happens is that if we're not careful, we can tell everything about this book in the beginning, in the introduction, that then when we give it to them, why are we giving it to them to
That's
read?
right. We've done everything.
They already know what the book's about. They're not gonna encounter anything to show whether or not they're putting application to anything they've learned previously. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
So you wanna make sure that you give the kids enough that they can begin to be successful with a text. But you also wanna not give them too much, so they have a little bit of a productive struggle, okay? Because in a productive struggle is when we learn. When things are too easy, learning doesn't happen as much. But a little bit of a productive struggle they do. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay. So we've got this introduction now part done. Okay. All right. So talk to me. We're going to be doing this together, and the way this looks is this. You get to make choices on the fact you can say to me, I want to just do this. Okay. But if anytime, Vicki, you see something that you think you could add in. Or if there's a certain point in the lesson that you say, I'd like to see how you do this part, then I'll do that part.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So talk to me. How do you feel about the introduction?
I feel okay on the introduction. I mean, I think I'll
Absolutely.
be okay on that.
I totally agree
Okay.
with you, okay? There's not anything I don't think you can't do. Does that make sense? I want you to feel comfortable though, partly because we have a lot of eyes on us right now and we're being videotaped, right? That I don't want you to at any point feel like I'm pushing you into something that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, okay?
Gotcha.
All right. So you'll do that part,
Okay.
okay? So let me tell you my next step, which you're already doing, is this right here. Yes, which color do you want?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
I'll
matter.
take green.
Okay.
Orange.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So just like you're doing,
Okay.
when you've got your numbers,
Mhm.
I want to show you another little trick I do,
Okay.
okay? Now that I've done this, okay, on the back of my book, I'm just gonna put very quickly whatever keywords I need from what I'm gonna do just here.
Okay.
So like here, for example, when it says, look at the men on the cover of the book, these are the Moss Brothers,
Okay.
okay? I'm gonna put title, I'm gonna put cover, and I'm gonna put Moss Brothers. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
And then I'm gonna say something about, I'm gonna put the word funny, and I'm gonna put a question mark there. Because that lets me know, I'm gonna ask that question, well, do you think they're funny?
Okay.
Why do you think they're funny? And so see how I just do that,
Okay.
kinda like that?
I gotcha.
The only reason I do that is this. When all of this is here, we can find ourselves going back and forth in it. There's nothing wrong with that except this, pacing of the lesson.
Okay.
That is the thing that teachers, often say is taking so long. Well, it's taking so long because we're not at the part where we feel totally comfortable. That's one,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And two, we don't own what we're planning in the lesson completely yet. Does that make sense? So that way, I have this up, and I'm simply going to go, hey guys, this book is called The Moss Brothers on Their Job.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at that picture for just a moment. Those are the Moss Brothers there. What do you notice about those Moss Brothers? Do you think they might be funny? What tells you they might be funny? What in that picture is telling you that? Why do you think that? Then, guys, I want to go ahead and tell you, turn to the cover page, and I want you to look at that picture. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes very much just conversational with those students, and you can keep that pace moving because you've got what you need right there. Does that help?
Gotcha. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
I know, because I get to making sure that I say everything
Yeah.
correct.
And you don't have to
want
say it correct.
Gotcha.
It's not about saying it what they have here. It's about what teaching language you need to use for your students and making sure we incorporate academic language. So, like in that, when we go from that first bullet to that second bullet there,
Mhm.
we just want to make sure we use that word connections.
Okay.
Okay? We want to say, can you make any connections? Well, not connect, when you're talking about the mess.
Right.
Can you make any connections
Okay.
to the fact that, have you ever made a mask? Yes, well, you're making a connection. Does that make sense? You want to call what they're doing what it is.
Okay.
Because all you're doing right now is you're laying foundation for them when it comes back up and they're learning it more.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
So you said use the word connections.
Yes. And it could be any way. I'm not going to tell you.
Oh,
because
yes.
it's gonna,
Uh-huh.
But it could be that you go, have any of you ever made a mask? And your little girl that you're talking about goes,
Uh-huh.
yes, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Uh-huh.
And then after she says those things and the other kids then you might look at them and say, what you're doing is you're making a connection.
Okay.
Making connection means that you can
Relate.
relate, that's the word.
Relate.
You can relate to that, to the fact that you've made a mess before too.
Okay.
There you go.
Gotcha. And then that's enough for the introduction.
That's it.
Okay.
Introduction should be one of the shorter pieces
Okay.
because otherwise we bring the book out.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. So then the next part is the reading of the text. And we're setting that up there in that last bullet you're going to do. Where you're just telling them that it seems like something always goes wrong for the brothers. So go back to the beginning of the book, read to find out what happened.
Okay.
So basically you don't have to say that. I would probably say, you know what? Let's read to find out what happens with these Moss brothers in their business and see if there's anything that goes wrong with it. It could be any language, any way you want to say it, but you're still conveying the same message.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. All right. So I want to go back again to my 4 students that you mentioned. Okay. The little girl that talks a lot. Does she have any issues reading wise that we need to be prepared for?
No.
Okay.
No, the reading wise is good. She has a hard time sometimes completing tasks,
Okay.
like paper, at your seat, things like that. She's easily distracted.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that will be part of our teaching in this team thing too, is helping her stay in. The other piece is gonna be, we wanna make sure that each student is using their pictures too. That they're not doing this, they're not just reading and stop sign, not that far said Joe, you know, and not looking at the pictures. We wanna call that to their attention in this, since that's part of what we want to happen here. So when they're actually reading, we'll say, you know what, I noticed that you kinda just read the words and moved on. Stop and go back and look at those pictures for just a minute.
And that's why they're reading independently.
That's
You're
right.
just
Mhm.
tapping,
That's
listening to
right.
them. Okay.
Okay, but then on the other hand, you also mentioned that, one of the little boys, he reads a little choppy, he gets too fast.
That would be my one who would not even look at the pictures.
Right,
Just be reading.
right, all right.
Yes.
So we've got multiple things we can work on with him there too, right? So we wanna have him slow down, looking at the pictures. But we also may wanna say with him, we might wanna say things like, you know, I noticed that you're reading that pretty fast. I want you to stop for just a moment. I'm gonna read this page you just read, and I want you to listen to how I read it. And we're not gonna do that on every page, because we're not gonna spend a lot of time with him, okay? I mean, we're not gonna spend the whole time with him.
Right.
But we're gonna model for him that if we need to, and get him to practice it himself, and then say something along the lines of, now you try it. You see what I mean? And then keep moving. Because that's our goal, is for him to start getting that to do. He's not gonna get mastery of it today. He's not gonna become proficient at not being choppy. But if we can get him moving into a couple of pages of not being choppy and slowing it down, then we're on the right road. Okay? All right. So in this piece, what I'm thinking, but you tell me, is that we're both doing this part,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? Because we've got, since we're both in there,
Might as well utilize it.
might as well utilize it, that's right. So we'll just work with the 4 kids,
Okay.
and listen in. And I will probably get up and walk around behind them some,
Okay.
so that I'm not trying to cross you, or else we'll go 2 and 2. Does that make sense? And we might start out with 2 and 2,
Okay.
but then I'll get up and move around to get the other 2, so you can get to the other 2. Does that
Okay.
make sense? Just to kind of hear them a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think it's gonna be important for you to hear your kids too,
Mhm.
all right? Okay. Now, here's something that, if it's okay with you, after they finish reading, it's not on here, okay? But it's something that I've learned that I feel like is very beneficial for the students, and that is that after they've read, and we're about to move into the comprehension, I will stop and I will tell them something that I noticed they were doing as readers,
Okay.
and how that's gonna help them.
Okay.
Okay? So if that's okay, I'm gonna do that piece
Yes,
to
ma'am.
show
Yes.
you what it can look
That would be
like.
good. Mhm.
Okay? Because all it does is affirming them in good reading behaviors and telling them what they're doing, so they know what they did as a reader that was good, and to keep it up.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. So the next part of this, oh, you know what I also forgot? I got so caught up, I do this sometimes. I meant to do this, okay? So we're gonna come back, we may come back to that
Okay.
reading bit, so we're gonna, right now. In the literacy continuum, you know, I showed y'all that once before. In the literacy continuum, in the guided section, you know, there's that paragraph, okay? Well, I made you and I both a copy. Y'all have one too that Lisa's bringing it, I'll send around to you if you haven't gotten one. And I'm gonna stop and tell you, I don't do this with every book, because the kids are not gonna move from a J today into a K tomorrow if they are just now reading a J. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I will look at this when my kids are moving into a new level,
Okay.
is what I like to do. And so, what I want us to do for just a moment is I just want us to look through, and I want you to notice some of the reading behaviors. As you're noticing them, think about what you know your kids are already doing, and what are a couple that we could work on, aside from what we've already talked about, okay?
I don't see really anybody in this group with short chapters.
Yeah.
it would definitely be more of a picture book,
Uh-huh,
short fiction text.
okay.
We are doing those some informational text in
Uh-huh.
science, so they
Uh-huh.
are familiar with that,
Good.
so.
I think even here, now that we've read this, okay, adjusting their reading strategies to process a range of fiction text, okay? That's what you're doing today with your pictures also.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Because we know that these pictures are gonna help so much with a story that we want them to slow down enough to notice the pictures. That's what that means. I'm adjusting
Okay.
my reading in order to look at my pictures. Do you see what I'm saying?
And then we talked about text features a good bit too.
Yeah.
So they're used to looking at the whole page
Right.
and not just that
Uh-huh.
one written text.
Yeah.
So we've been practicing that too. So that's will help. And we've been working compounding complex sentences.
Yeah. See? This is
They'll-
affirming,
yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Yes.
They will probably, if they see a fanboy, they will probably tell you.
Uh-huh.
And if they see a sentence destroyer, they will probably tell
There
you
you
that
go.
too. Because they are on the prowl.
That's right.
Done some with suffixes.
Uh-huh.
It's in small group.
Uh-huh. And then when you get to that sentence that says in oral reading, do you
That's
see
right.
that?
Yes, ma'am. That's where I
Okay.
was at. Yeah.
You said in your thing about stress,
Right.
okay? So I wanted to show you that. All of those things are pieces that go along with that inflection, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's listed there. I forgot to ask this question. Sometimes I get ahead of myself, I have to go back, that's just how I am. Do any of your students use their finger tracking?
Some of them do, some of them don't. I was curious if that was something to point out.
Yes, we
Okay.
want them to take that
Okay.
away as we can get them to take it away.
Okay, that's what. Okay.
Yeah.
I sort of hated to introduce it if they wasn't doing it. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right. Now here's what when you go to look at the literacy continuum and you look at what Fontes and Pinnell's research has been and the studies they've done on students, it's around a level D that you begin to have students wanting to do, 4 to 6 lines without using their finger. But I believe it's a level E. I'd have to go back and double check, okay? That's when if you're encouraged to take your finger away
Okay.
and read with just your eyes. Now, I do tell my kids that even as an adult, there are times when I'm reading a very complex text for me that I'll put my finger back in the text for a little bit, but I take it back out. But not making it a crutch where I'm always using it, okay? So that might be something we want to look for today too,
Okay.
is if that's something they're using and they're using it all the time,
Okay.
encourage them, say, you know what, don't you think you could read this next page without your finger? Try it for me.
I don't remember anybody